ثمراته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون.
رسول الله نسأل الله العزيز الجليل أن يجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما ولا يجعل من بيننا شقيا ولا محروما. نسأل الله العلي الجليل أن يذكرنا في الملأ الأعلى ويجعلنا ممن يجلسون على منابر من نور يوم القيامة، الذين جلسوا على حب الله عز وجل وابتغاء مرضاته. أسأل الله الإخلاص واليقين والثبات. لازلنا مع سيرة النبلاء. We're still continuing the stories of the Salaf. And tonight, inshallah, I have a member of the Salaf, rahmatullahi alayhim ajma'in, who exemplified ilm and who was categorized and titled as Sa3eed Tabi'een. Sa3eed Tabi'een meaning the head, the big shot, the best of all the Tabi'een, rahmatullahi alayhim ajma'in. Abdullah ibn Umar, he mentioned him and he said, if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saw this man, لأسره, he would be pleased with him. Abdullah ibn Umar, he said, had Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam witnessed this man, he would be pleased, enjoyed to meet him. هذه شهادة من؟ شهادة Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu warḍah. And he was noted to be the shadow of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu warḍah, meaning he followed Abu Hurairah as though he was his shadow. فنقل عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه وأرضاه كل كلمة وكل حديث. And as you guys know, ولا يخفى عن شريف علمكم, Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه وأرضاه was the most knowledgeable of all the Sahaba when it came to the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For he was the one that sacrificed his whole life to shadow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And ومع ذلك, just to show you how close he was to Abu Hurairah, he wasn't just his student. Abu Hurairah wasn't just his teacher. Abu Hurairah was his father-in-law. Abu Hurairah زوجه بنته الشريفة العفيفة. So not only was he bonded with Abu Hurairah in terms of knowledge, but in terms of family ties as well. رحمة الله عليهم أجمعين. وهو من هو سعيد ابن المسيب بالكسر. ابن المسيب. سعيد ابن المسيب ابن حزن ابن أبي وهب ابن عمرو. صحابي تابعي جليل من أكبر وسيد العلماء التابعين. And his grandfather and his father were Sahaba رضي الله عنهم ورضاهم. His grandfather, when he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he testified his faith, he said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked me what was my name. فقلت حزن. Hazan. And hazan here, the Arabs used to use it in two different terms: sadness or ghilda, or roughness. And so his father named him the rough one. The rough one, meaning he wasn't very lenient. He was very tough and rough. And this was the way of the Arab, by the way. Abu Hurairah's name, Ibn Sakhar, the son of the stone. They were very rough men. So his father named, the grandfather of Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib was named Hazan, meaning the rough one. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to him, he said, change your name to Sahel. Sahel, meaning lenient, easy. فأبى. He kindly refused. And you know why he refused? Because they had a very staunch pride with their lineage. فقال قد سماني أبي حزن فأبيت. He said, my father named me Hazan, so I want to stay with my father's name, how he named me. You see, subhanAllah. So Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib, he narrates after in his life, he says, وَلَا زَالَ الْحُزْنُ فِينَا. He says, And that characteristic of being rough, a little bit rough around the edges, that still remained. Because my grandfather refused the blessed name of Rasulullah ﷺ to take it on. يعني سبحان الله. فهو سعيد ابن المسيب ابن حزن ابن أبي وهب ابن عمرو. And he was from the tribe of Quraysh, more specifically from Banu Makhzum, who were well known. And his nickname was Abu Muhammad. And he was born during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu ardah, and he lived, there's a difference of opinion, either 8 or 9 years of the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu ardah. How long was the Khilafah of Umar? 12, 10, let's say 10 years. So he was about 8 years old when Umar radiallahu anhu ardah was martyred. And there is the riwayat عنه عن عمر رضي الله عنه وارضاه. فقد سئل الإمام أحمد رحمة الله عليه هل تصح رواية, is it authentic to take the riwayah of Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib عن عمر? فقال, if we don't acknowledge this riwayah, then whose riwayah should we acknowledge? So he was at that age taking a hadith from the Sahaba radwanullahi alayhim ajma'in. And as I mentioned, he was the shadow of Abu Hurairah. Wherever Abu Hurairah went, he would follow. And we have to do 2 series on who Abu Hurairah was. If I told you that Abu Hurairah was not an ordinary man, it doesn't even begin to describe him. This man was a living, breathing, walking computer. Abu Hurairah, a living, breathing, walking computer. Not only did he memorize the most ahadith, he will tell you who was there, what they were wearing, on what occasion, لماذا قال, everything. Photographic memory. And this man, he saw this. And by the way, it was mentioned that Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib never wrote anything down, because he wanted to mimic Abu Hurairah's memory as well. So he reflected Abu Hurairah's photographic memory. He had the same exact way of learning. And you can see this in many who have memorized the Quran. You will mimic the methodology of your teacher. And what a better teacher than Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu ardah. So he shadowed him, and as I mentioned, he married from his family, he married the daughter of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu wa ardah. And not only did he narrate from Abu Hurairah, he narrated from many of the Sahaba that were around during that time. And he mentions in his works, he says, I have traveled days and nights to compile one single hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yani badal hayat, this man, he sacrificed his entire life so that we today can have the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And many riwayat of Abu Hurairah, if you hear Abu Hurairah in the Sanad, take it as authentic, by the way. معظم الوقت. Obviously there's people who fabricate and lie, but that's easy to weed out. But I'm talking about the narrations that are credible. If you hear عن أبي هريرة وراءه, you'll find عن ابن المسيب, عن سعيد بن المسيب رضي الله عنه رحمة الله عليه ورضي الله عنه أجمعين. So he stated that I valued my time in terms of collecting narrations of the authentic sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was undoubtedly a hafiz, a qari, but notable for his hadith. So he was a muhaddith, rahmatullahi alayh. And during the time of the Sahaba, he was the one who was giving fatawa. During the time of the Sahaba, he was giving fatawa in Medina. And the Sahaba did not negate him. It shows you that this man's ilm is credible, is actual. Had he been someone who was of lesser knowledge, he would not have the audacity to speak. When the Sahaba are there, he was giving fatwa, and they would agree and coincide with his fatwa, subhanAllah. He states, and his students, they stated, كان أبو محمد يحج كل عام. He would go to Hajj every year. 40 times in his life did he perform Hajj. نسأل الله أن يتقبل منه ومنكم. 40 times. 40 times. And he said about himself, he said, for 40 years, I never once missed a Salat Jama'ah. For 40 years, never once did I miss a Salat Jama'ah. And not only that, for 30 of those years, I never saw the back of another Musalli, meaning Saf al-Awwal. For 30 years. And for those 30 years, he says the adhan would never go unless I was in the masjid. La shak, there is no doubt that this man devoted his life to ibadah. Fi masjid Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he lived through the fitna of the Sahaba, radwanullah alayhim ajma'een, and he lived through the Umayyad Khilafah and the fitna of the Qurrat. Remember we mentioned the fitna of the Qurrat, Abdurrahman Ibn Al Ash'ath, and he was in that fitna, and he was in that war against Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. However, when he met Al-Hajjaj, remember Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf defeated Ibn Al Ash'ath, and Al-Hajjaj was merciless. He said, I want everyone who is against me to come. And he rounded everyone up. And you remember he killed Sa3eed ibn Jubayr, rahmatullah alayhi, rahmatun wasi'ah. When they brought Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib in front of Al-Hajjaj, Al-Hajjaj was very lenient towards him. He took a liking to him. And a lot of the people, they wondered, Ya Aba Muhammad, how come Hajjaj didn't just cut your head? You know, you remember what he did to Sa3eed ibn Jubayr. He mocked him, he made fun of him, and he eventually chopped his head. When it came time for Sa3eed ibn Musayyib, he was lenient with him and he let him go. So his companions, they were wondering, what kind of relationship do you have with him? Do you have a wasta with him? How is this so? And he said, I noted one occasion where Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf came to Medina, and he was a young boy, and he did not know how to pray. He was praying in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, and I lahattu. He says, I noticed he didn't know how to pray. لم يتم القيام والركوع والسجود. So I threw pebbles at him to get his attention, and I called him forward, and I taught him how to pray. So Sa3eed ibn Musayyib taught Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf how to pray properly. And la shak, he learned from the best of teachers, Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu warḍah, who narrates mu'adham ahadith Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, كيف كان يصلي. If you look at Kitab Shaykh Al-Albani rahmatullah alayh, Sifat Salat al-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the majority of those narrations are on Abi Hurairah, on Abi Hurairah, on Abi Hurairah. So he taught Hajjaj ibn Yusuf how to pray. And he said, perhaps it's because of that, because how nice he was, how lenient he was, how, he didn't say, hey boy, you don't know how to pray, get out of here, or learn how to pray, and he pushed him around. No. He taught him with adab, with etiquette, with qawl al-layn, very kind and merciful and humble. So he said, perhaps it was that allowed him to be lenient towards me. Wallahu a'la wa a'lam. And rahmatullah alayh, he was involved in another fitna. وكانت وتسمى بوقعة الحارة. This was a كارثة عظمى, by the way. And this happened 63 years from the hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when the people of Medina took back their bay'ah. They took back their bay'ah from Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And Yazid ibn Muawiyah, he sent to them a man by the name of Muslim ibn Uqba al-Murri. Muslim ibn Uqba al-Murri. And many of the scholars in the Salaf, they actually changed his name to Musrif. Musrif, not Muslim, because he was Shadid al-Batsh. And وَسَفَكَ دِمَاء الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَالصَّحَابَ وَأَبْنَائِهِمْ وَالْأَنصَارِ رضي الله عنهم ورحمه الله أجمعين. And he was sent to Medina with 10,000 troops at the gates of Medina. And he gave them 3 days to comply, to take back their bay'ah, to re-establish their bay'ah, and or else there's going to be a war. So after the 3 days, he asked them, he says, Ya Ahl al-Medina, what do you guys want to do? Do you guys want to fight it out? So they said yes. And they had a war that shed the blood of many Muslims, Ansar, wa Sahaba, wa Abna'ihim. And this was a karitha udma that had never been seen before. And Abdullah ibn Hamdallah, rahmatullah alayhi, he was martyred in that battle. And Abi Sa3eed Al Khudri was a Sahabi who was involved in that battle. He fled. When he fled, one of the men of Ibn Uqba followed him. And he said it was dark, and he followed me into a cave. We're talking about Abi Sa3eed Al Khudri. Abi Sa3eed Al Khudri, الذي روى عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الحديث, the famous hadith, قد كان في من كان قبلكم رجل قتل 99 نفسا. Remember the hadith we started with? The man who killed 99 and ended it with 100? That's عن أبي سعيد الخدري. أبي سعيد صحابي جليل رضي الله عنه. So one of the men of Ibn Uqba followed him into a cave, into a crevice. And he says, وَكَانَ ظَلَامًا دَامِسًا. It was dark. So I took out my sword. And he said, I was ready to kill. And I was ready to be killed. And then he said, I thought about it. And the man followed him. And then he put his sword away. So the man asked, he says, who are you? قال أبي سعيد. قال أبي سعيد الخدري. قال نعم. قال صاحب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. You're the companion of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. قال نعم. فخلى عنه. He left him. Just to show you the fitna that occurred during this time. So Az-Zuhri, he narrates, he relates that 800 plus from the Sahaba and their lineage were murdered. Their blood was shed all over Medina. And some narrations say it was thousands of Ahl Medina that were killed and murdered. And 3 days this war went on, and this onslaught and this murder went on. Sallallahu al-afiyah. And all of this, where is Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib? Where is Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib? Where do you think he is? He's in the masjid of Rasulullah. For those 3 days of killing and murder and bloodshed and onslaught, Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib was the only one to perform salah in the masjid of Rasulullah. There was no salat jama'ah. People were running, hiding, bleeding, injured. There is no adhan in Medina. Well, I'm not making this up. You can go back to the tariq and see. This was a time of fitna. And Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib was the only one. And he says, كنت أصلي في مسجد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. فسألوه, his تلاميذ, they asked him, he says, كيف كنت تسمع النداء? Who was making adhan? How did you hear the nida? فقال, he says, I used to hear adhan from the hujra of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم. يعني, this is a man, like, absolutely قلبه معلق بالمساجد. And he was حريص على السنة وحريص على الجماعة رحمة الله عليه رحمة واسعة. Sa3eed Ibn Al Musayib was also known for his interpretation of dreams. تفسير الرؤى, تعبير الرؤى. Now, this is something that has grown to be a despicable sense, because every now and then people will see a dream. First of all, it's not even the ru'ya, it's a dream of absolute rubbish. أضغاث وأحلام. They'll see a bird fly and then it becomes a tiger and then it dies and the flower grows and they're like, it's a ru'ya. Listen, this is khurayfat. I'll tell you a little bit about what a ru'ya is. First of all, there's 3 types of dreams. There's the dreams that come from the nafs, من الشهوات. So, for example, you're all day you're thinking about a car, a specific car. Somebody give me what's your favorite car? Ferrari. What's your favorite car? Bugatti? Okay, so all day he's thinking about a Bugatti and he's looking it up and he's reading all the facts about it and all the different colors and the specs, and then he goes to sleep and he sees himself driving a Bugatti. And he says, this is a ru'ya from Allah. I'm going to own a Bugatti. This is from the nafs. Al-aghlab is from the nafs. And then there's the dreams of shaitan. The dreams of shaitan are sporadic. They have no sense, no beginning, no end. They're meaningless. One moment you're flying, the next moment you're swimming, the next moment you're rolling down a snowy hill. It has no meaning, no sense. And when this happens, if you wake up and you're startled by this dream, استعيذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وادفل على يسارك ثلاثة. Dry spit on your left 3 times. استعيذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. And don't even talk about these dreams. Don't go around telling your friends. The last, and this is the one that we're talking about, is the ru'ya. And عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه وأرضاه, he narrates that it is 1/6 of nubuwah. Different narrations. That doesn't mean you're a prophet. It means it is a glimpse of the hikmah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the anbiya and the rusul. And لا تكاد رؤية المؤمن تصدق. Near the end of times, the believer's ru'ya will become widespread and true. It will come to fruition, it will come to be. And its signs are very simple. It's short, it's vivid, and you will never forget it, and it comes true. 4 signs. It's not long, it's very short, very vivid. The details you remember exactly. The texture, the smell, the sounds, the sights. And it is very accurate, and it comes true. So, Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib, he was known for interpreting dreams accurately. And they said that he learned this from the daughter of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And I'll give you an example. And by the way, don't think that we base any ahkam on dreams. This is from the tasawwuf, this is from the Sufiya. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them. They base their rulings on dreams. We don't do that. لا أبدا. الأحكام الشرعية تفتقر في ثبوتها للأدلة الصحيحة الصريحة من الكتاب والسنة. Okay? And this is from the أمور الغيبية, the unseen matters. And what did we say about the unseen matters? What's the hukum for that? This was the first halaqah we did.
Oh, we believe it, but we don't ask how.
Ahsant. And what happens to the mind when you're talking about the unseen? Naqifu, we stop where?
We stop with the Quran and Sunnah.
Ahsant. When it comes to الأمور الغيبية يقف العقل لا استقلالا للعقل في أمور الغيبيات ويقف العقل حينما وقف النقل. We don't ask why and how and maybe and perhaps. We have the Quran and Sunnah وكفى بذلك. So when it comes to the ru'yas and the dreams, these are not to be taken as ahkam. Never. وكان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بعد صلاة الفجر ينظر إلى الصحابة ويسأل هل من منكم رأى فأفسر له. Or كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. He used to ask the Sahaba, who of you has seen a dream? So I can give him the interpretation. And Abu Bakr رضي الله عنه وارضاه was known for interpreting dreams with him. وكان يصيب ويخطئ رضي الله عنه وارضاه. And his daughter, she learned it from her father. And Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib learned it from her. So it was noted that he had a very good understanding of interpreting dreams. One of the dreams that came across during his time, listen to this. A man from Medina, who's Salih, a person of proper conduct, he saw a dream. A crow landed on the Kaaba. That's it. That's a ru'ya. How does he know it's a ru'ya? Very vivid. He can describe to you exactly how it happened, everything about it. And how does he know it's a ru'ya? Because he wasn't thinking about crows in the Kaaba in the sense. Okay? And it comes, by the way, I forgot another sign. It usually comes just before Fajr. I forgot this sign. Just before Fajr. And by the way, you can actually have a ru'ya during the stage of yaqadha. ما بين النوم واليقظة. Okay? Just between the stage of wakefulness and sleepfulness. So it doesn't have to be just before Fajr. But this is something you can go back to. I have a dars exactly on this. Anyways, so a man who was Insan Salih came to the Shaykh. He says, Ya Shaykh, Ya Abu Muhammad, I saw a ru'ya where a crow landed on the Kaaba. Most of us would be like, okay, there's crows everywhere. What are we going to do with it? I need to get him off the Kaaba. No. فقال Ibn Musayyib قال, I believe that Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf will marry the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ja'far. مكثت أيام, just a few days later, they heard the announcement. that Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf married the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ja'far. So they said, Ya Sheikh, please elaborate, how did you come up with that? And it doesn't mean he knows ilm al-ghayb, hasha, la. But he's been given a hikmah in order to interpret this. فقال رحمة الله عليه رحمة واسعة, he says, أخبث ما نعرف, he says, the most hideous of people, the most evil of people in our midst is Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. He didn't say kafir, huh? He didn't say kafir. He wasn't from the ulama that kafaru. He says, the most evil of the people, the treacherous of the people, is Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. And the crow mimics that. Huh? Because he's a gharib. He's a gharib. ولذلك Allah Azza wa Jalla, this is from the ulama, they said the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he chose the crow to bury, to teach the children of Adam how to bury, he says, why did he choose a crow? Why not a rabbit or an eagle? لأن ما فعله ابن آدم هابيل كان غريبا. It was strange. It was the first murder ever to be committed. وصار غريبا, and he became a stranger in his lands because of what he did. فالله عز وجل بعث غرابا للغريب والفعل الغريب. So he said, the worst of people we know in our midst, in our ummah, is Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, and he mimicked him to the crow. And he says, إن أطهروا وأشرفوا بيت الكعبة. And the most blessed, the most noble house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Kaaba. And from the lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the most notable, the most humble, the most pious of women is the daughter of Abdullah ibn Ja'far, min Ahl al-Bayt. So he says, فوقع الغراب عليها. So الوقوع هنا يدل على النكاح. He says, and because the crow landed on it, it's exactly how the male lands on the female. Subhanallah. Another dream interpretation that he, rahmatullah alayhi, fassar, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he had a dream that he urinated in the mihrab of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam 4 times. He urinated in the mihrab. You know the mihrab? This is the mihrab, right here. In the mihrab of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam 4 times. لا شك, يعني this is شيء غريب. ولكن بالاستدلال عليه, there's something of meaning to this. So when he heard about the dream, Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib, he said, he will have 4 sons, and each of his sons will take over the Khilafah. And exactly how it was, حتى بعد ما مات كان عند عبد الملك بن مروان had Walid, Sulaiman, Yazid, wa Hisham. 4 sons. So it just goes to show you that the interpretation of dreams is not as what you think or I think. And the whole aspect of you going on Google and typing ibnusireen.org or whatever .com, and you put I saw this is far-fetched. And I'll go into some detail about this because it's very important. A lot of us and our mothers and our aunts, they see dreams and they go to Sheikh Google. This is rubbish. Because every dream is على حسب الإنسان نفسه, is based upon the individual himself. I'll give you an example. Ibn Sireen, who was known for ta'bir al-ru'a, in his majlis of ilm, he used to teach his students. A man came and he says, Barakallahu feek ya Shaykh astaftik. I want to ask you about a ru'ya. He says, Tafaddal. He says, I saw myself making adhan. فسكت الشيخ. Shaykh went silent. He thought about it. He looked at him. He says, you will steal and your hands will be cut. Your hand will be cut. So the man obviously stood up and he says, Barakallahu feek, I guess, and he left. In the same majlis, another man came. It was time for people to ask. And he says, Ya Shaykh astaftik, qala tafaddal. He says, Ya Shaykh, I saw myself making adhan. So the Shaykh iltafat. He looked at him and he says, Inshallah, you will go to Hajj. So after the majlis, his close students, he says, Ya Shaykh, Kaif, how is this so? It's the same dream, but you gave 2 completely, utterly different meanings. قال الأول, we know him, the first man, we know him. He's not known to be a very easygoing, properly conducting Muslim. and he's known to have a slight hand. And in Surah Yusuf, Allah Azza wa Jalla, He says, فَأَذَّنَ مُؤَذِّنٌ أَيُّهَا السَّارِقُونَ. The second man, we know him to be a regular from our Jama'ah. He's always in the Jama'ah, always at the Salat on time. وَإِنسَانٌ صَالِحٌ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, لإبراهيم فأذن في الناس يأتوك من كل فج عميق. And that's exactly how the dreams came out. The first man, he stole, he got his hand cut, and the other man, he went to Hajj. So it's not universal. You don't just type it in on Google or ibnusirin.com and you get your dream. It's very personal. Okay? Very personal. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he appointed an emir of Medina, and his name was Hisham ibn Ismail al-Makhzumi. And he wanted the bay'ah to continue. He wanted to maintain and obtain the bay'ah. And Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib, he rejected. He said, I don't want nothing to do with this. So Hisham ibn Ismail al-Makhzumi, he lashed Sa3eed Abu Muhammad publicly 60 times, and he paraded him around Medina. And this was noted that the Shaykh, rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatan wasi'ah, he did nothing to reject, he just did not want to be involved. وَلِذَلِكَ, they wanted him to speak and announce his support to them, and he doesn't want anything to do with them in the sense, because he doesn't want to carry that burden on Yawm al-Qiyamah. وَلِذَلِكَ جُلِدْ 60 مرة. He was lashed, openly lashed 60 times in the middle of Medina and paraded around, and he did not say a word. Rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatan wasi'ah. And Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he wrote to him once. He wrote to Hisham upon hearing this, and he says, let him go. Let him go, because he knows his status as a alim, as a respected religious figure. So he said, let him go. And it was cited that because of his i'tizal from the Khilafah, in the sense, he was a rogue scholar. What do I mean by a rogue scholar? He was a person of ilm, but he didn't want his ilm to influence the Khilafah or to be cited as a scholar of the Khilafah. So he absolved himself from them. And this was notable when Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he came to Medina on one occasion after performing Hajj. وَكَانَ Sa3eed يُدَرِّسُ. Sa3eed Ibn Musayyib, he was teaching his students. فَأَرْسَلَ إِلَيْهِ. He sent one of his messengers. He says, go and tell Sa3eed that I want to speak with him, and tell him to come. So when the messenger of Abdul Malik came to him, he says, يَطْلُبُكَ الْأَمِيرُ. He's in the middle of the dars. He says, لَا حَاجَةَ لِي مِنْهُ. Meaning, I have no need for him, and he has no need for me. Leave me alone. And you can see that he was disturbed by this. So the messenger, he went back to Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. He says, this is exactly what he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, I don't know what to do. He says, ذَاكَ Abu Muhammad. He says, that is Abu Muhammad. And then he called him a second time, and the second time still, he says, I don't need to see him, he doesn't need to see me. This was Sa3eed Ibn Al Musayib, rahmatullahi alayhi. He did not care about his mansib amongst the kings and the khulafa and the umara. Whereas opposed to nowadays, we have a lot of people who are people of ilm, but they're afraid of their positions. They're worried more about their paychecks than promoting the good and forbidding the evil. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us all. But this is something that we need to take note about. Al-alim al-jaleel wari'. Al-alim al-jaleel, the great scholars, they have an honor, they have bravery. They're not just there to teach books and lessons. They're there to teach etiquettes and manners. Rahmatullahi alayhim ajma'in. The story of his daughter's marriage is a very famous story, and I'm going to go through it very quickly, inshallah, to give you guys time to prepare for Salat al-Isha. So, his daughter was notably very knowledgeable, as her father was a scholar. and she was very beautiful. من أجمل نساء مدينة. She was from the most beautiful women of Medina. And Abdul Malik ibn Marwan actually asked for her hand for one of his sons, وأبى Sa3eed. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, he wanted her for one of his sons, and Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib, he rejected him. He says, no, we don't want to give you, we don't have anything to give you. And this is the bravery, the audacity of this man, rahmatullahi alayhi, rahmatun wasi'ah. And he had many students, and one of his notable students was used to go by the kunya of Ibn Abi Wada'. And he was very dutiful student. He would support the Shaykh and be present for all of his halaqat. And he noticed غاب عنه. His student, Ibn Abi Wada', he stopped coming. فسأل عنه. He asked about him. And they said that he's going through a difficult time. So he went to his house to visit him. Just take this as an example. These are people of ilm. He didn't say, oh, okay, well, he's going to miss out. Or when he comes, I'll talk to him. He went to his house. وَطَرَقَ عَلَى بَابِ بَيْتِهِ. And he knocks on his door. وَسَأَلَ عَنْهُ. This is the people of ilm, the etiquette of people of ilm. So he asked him, he says, what is going on with you? What are you going through? So he said to him, he said, my wife has passed away and I'm going through a difficult time. And this is هذا حالي يعني. فأبي Muhammad, he said, فَلْنُزَوِّجُوكَ. We need to get you married. This is his solution. The guy is going through stress, financial hardship. You know, he hasn't been attending his halaqat. He says, فَلْنُزَوِّجُوكَ. He says, وَمَنْ يُزَوِّجُنِي يا أبو Muhammad. Who's gonna marry me, their daughter, Abu Muhammad? I have nothing. I have 3 dinars to my name, or something very qaleel, yani very little. فقال أنا. The Shaykh said, I will marry. I'll get you married. So he went away, and then it was Salat al-Maghrib. And by the way, Ibn Abi Wada', he narrates this incident. بِتَفَاصِيل. If you read it in Arabic, you'll be amazed. He says, so I went to Salat al-Maghrib. وَكُنْتُ صَائِمًا. He says, I went to Salat al-Maghrib and I was fasting. So I broke my fast and I went home to eat something. He says, وَمَا كَانَ عِنْدِي. All I had was خبز يابس, يعني some dry bread that was soaked in some oil. That's all he had. After a long day's fasting, that's what he's going to have for dinner. فَسَمِعْتُ طَارِقًا عِنْدَ الْبَابِ. I heard him knocking at the door. فَقُلْتُ مَنْ. Who is it? فَقَالَ Sa3eed. So he said, خطر على بالي كل سعيد إلا سعيد بن المسيب. He says, I thought of every Sa3eed I knew. سعيد بن عمر, سعيد بن فلان, سعيد إلا سيد التابعين. Except for the head, my teacher, Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib. He says, I never thought it would be him. Why? Because he was notable to stay at the masjid. Remember? 30 years, 30 سنة ولم تفوت تكبيرة الإحرام. ولا يسمع النداء من برا المسجد. So when I opened the door, I found him, my sheikh. وَمِنْ وَرَائِهِ ابْنَتُهُ. And behind him his daughter. فقال كما قلنا على بركة الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And he pushed his daughter in and he went to the masjid. So when his daughter came in, she fell to the ground in al-hayat. She was shy. And he said, I pushed away the little bowl that had the dry crumbs in there because I was embarrassed. I pushed it to the side. وَطَرَقْتُ جِيرَانِي. He says, I called my neighbors to call my mom. So his mom came running. And she says, مَا بَالِكَ. What's going on, my son? He says, my new wife. New wife? How did this happen? He says, she's the daughter of Sheikh Sa3eed. So she said, 3 days, you will not touch her. I will take care of her, beautify her, and then we'll have a walima, and so on. And he says, after the 3 days, دخلت بها, I married her and consummated my marriage with her. And he says, وَمَا رَأَيْتُ مِنْ أَجْمَلِ نِسَاءٍ. She was the most beautiful, the most humble, the most amazing wife a man could ever desire. And then he says, when I went to the halaqah of my Sheikh Sa3eed, جلست مع طلاب العلم. He says, after the halaqah, he looked at me and he said, ما بال فلان. He says, what's going on with that person? See, like he's speaking in code because people are still around in the masjid. So he said, that person is exactly how you desire, ya Shaykh. And he said to him, he says, make sure that you take care of it, make sure that you're good with her in a sense. And if she goes astray, make sure. And that's how he married his daughter. Nothing, no mahar, no, we want to see your PhD, we want to know where she's gonna live, we want 30,000 muqaddam, 50,000 muakhar, we want an insurance guarantee. No, none of this. None of this. And this is a karitha uzma that we are living with nowadays. A young brother, he tells me, he said, I wanted to ask for her hand. Her father sharat alayhi 30,000 muqaddam, 30,000 up front, down payment, yeah? And then 60,000 muakhar. What is this? It's a car? A Rolls Royce? What is this? A'udhu billah. This is despicable. And then you wonder why our mujtama is going to the fasad, to the halak, to the muharramat. Because نحن فسدنا وقلوبنا فسدت ونياتنا فسدت. لذلك there is no hope for these young shabab. You're laughing, huh? Don't laugh, man. I'm telling you, you want to get married. I tell this to everyone. Forget about the girls here. إلا من رحم الله. إلا من رحم الله. Most of them want this and that and the other, They want the whole kit and caboodle, but they're not even worth it, صح? إلا من رحم الله. There is women here and families من أحب وأعز الناس وأفضل الناس, but the majority of it, Don't waste your time. You want a proper wife, go back home or go to refugee camps and get yourself a wife that will treat you like the king that you are, and you treat her like the queen that she is. Okay? No 50,000 or 60,000 muqaddam muakhir وهذا الكلام كله باطل. Okay? So that's how Sa3eed Ibnu Al Musayib married his daughter to his student Ibn Abi Wada'a, rahmatullah alayhi. When the Shaykh reached a late age, old age in his life, he fell very ill, and he was surrounded by his students in Medina, and he would come to conscious and he would fall unconscious. And one of the moments where he fell unconscious, rahmatullah alayhi, فَقَبَّلُوا, they changed his bed and pointed him towards the Qibla. فَأَفَاقَ, when he woke up, he says, who did that? Which one of you did that? And none of them, they were too shy to speak. And he says, what would that benefit me if you pointed me towards the Qibla when I was not upon the Qibla? يعني حتى آخر كلامه كان في الصميم. What was the point of you facing me towards the Qibla if I wasn't يعني على اتجاهها في حياتي؟ ومات رحمة الله عليه رحمة واسعة. نسأل الله أن يلحقه بالصالحين ويدخله الفردوس الأعلى مع النبيين والصديقين والشهداء، ودفن في البقيع رحمة الله عليه رحمة واسعة. And these are the stories of the Salaf al-Salih that we need to revise and look over, because there are many people who are calling towards their following. And you've seen it all on YouTube, all these models and these groups and these influencers. These are people, نسأل الله لهم الهدى, نسأل الله أن يهديهم. The Salaf, those who died upon the haqq and lived upon it, these are our qudwa. بارك الله فيكم وأشكركم على حسن استماعكم، وعفوا إذا أطلت وعذرا إذا أخطأت، ما أريد إلا الإصلاح ما استطعت. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك، أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت، أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.